Hello, and welcome to another episode of Top 5 Haunted Locations. Today, we are going to explore some of the most haunted places in Mississippi, the Magnolia State. From eerie cemeteries to spooky mansions, Mississippi has a lot of paranormal activity to offer. So, let's get started with our countdown. Number 5, the McRaven House, Vicksburg, Mississippi. Our first stop is the McRaven House, located in the historic town of Vicksburg. This house is considered the most haunted house in Mississippi and the third most haunted in the country. The house was built in 3 stages, starting from 1797, and each section has its own ghost. Some of the spirits that haunt the house are Mary Elizabeth Howard, who died in childbirth in 1836, John H. Bobb, who was killed by Union soldiers in 1864, and William Murray, who died of natural causes in 1911. Visitors have reported seeing apparitions, hearing voices, feeling cold spots, and even being touched by unseen hands. The house also served as a Confederate hospital during the Civil War, and some of the wounded soldiers still linger in the basement. If you are brave enough, you can take a tour of the house and experience the hauntings for yourself. The history of McRaven House is a story of 3 families, 3 wars, and 3 ghosts. The house was built by Andrew Glass, a pioneer and a highwayman, who constructed the first section of the house in 1797. He built a small, 2-room structure, with a kitchen and a bedroom. He also dug a well and planted a garden on the property. He lived there with his wife and children, until he was killed by Native Americans in 1805. His wife sold the house and moved away, leaving behind the ghost of Glass, who is said to haunt the well and the garden. The house was bought by Stephen Howard, a wealthy businessman and a planter, who added the second section of the house in 1836. He built a large, 2-story addition, with a dining room, a parlor, a staircase, and 4 bedrooms. He also decorated the house with fine furniture and art, and hosted lavish parties and social events. He lived there with his wife, Mary Elizabeth, and their children, until Mary Elizabeth died in childbirth in 1836. She gave birth to a baby girl in the bedroom, but suffered complications and bled to death. She was buried in the backyard, along with her baby, who also died. Her ghost is said to haunt the bedroom, where she died, and sometimes appears in the window or the mirror. She is also known to smell of lavender, her favorite scent. The house was sold to John H. Bobb, a lawyer and a politician, who added the 3rd section of the house in 1849. He built a brick annex, with a library, a study, a bathroom, and a nursery. He also installed gas lighting and plumbing, and modernized the house. He lived there with his wife, Ellen, and their children, until he was killed by Union soldiers in 1864. He was shot in the chest on the front porch, while trying to defend his house from the invaders. He was buried in the Cedar Hill Cemetery, along with his wife, who died of grief a few months later. His ghost is said to haunt the front porch, where he was killed, and sometimes appears as a shadow or a figure. He is also known to make sounds, such as knocking, coughing, and groaning. The house was used as a Confederate hospital during the Civil War, and was visited by General John C. Pemberton, who surrendered Vicksburg to the Union Army in 1863. The house was also the scene of a skirmish between the Confederate and Union forces, and several soldiers were wounded or killed in the house. Some of their ghosts are said to haunt the basement, where they were treated and buried. They sometimes appear as orbs, shadows, or figures, and like to interact with the visitors. They are also known to make sounds, such as moaning, groaning, and crying. The house was bought by William Murray, a railroad tycoon and a philanthropist, who lived there with his wife, Annie, and their children, until he died of natural causes in 1911. He was the last owner of the house, and left it to his daughter, Ella, who never lived in the house, but rented it to various tenants. The house was abandoned and neglected for decades, until it was restored and opened to the public in 1961. The house is now a museum, and visitors can see the different styles and periods of the house, as well as the personal belongings and artifacts of the former owners and residents. The house is also a home to the spirits of the past, who are still attached to the house and its history. If you are looking for a historic and haunted experience, McRaven House is the place to visit. Number 4, Longwood Mansion, Natchez, Mississippi. Our second haunted location is another mansion in Natchez, the Longwood Mansion. This octagonal-shaped mansion was built in 1860 by Holler Nutt, a wealthy cotton planter. The mansion was designed to be a grand showpiece, with 6 floors, 32 rooms, and a Byzantine-style dome. However, the mansion was never completed, due to the outbreak of the Civil War. Nutt died in 1864, leaving his wife Julia and their 8 children in the unfinished mansion. Of the 32 rooms planned for the house, only 9 rooms on the basement floor were completed. Longwood is the largest octagonal house in the United States. The history of Longwood is a story of a broken dream. Nutt hired Samuel Sloan, a famous architect from Philadelphia, to design his mansion in the Oriental villa style, which was popular at the time. Sloan's design was inspired by his 1852 book, The Model Architect, where he presented an illustration of an Oriental villa with a unique onion-shaped dome. Nutt was fascinated by the exotic design and wanted to build it on his land in Natchez. He bought the land as a gift for his wife Julia, who was also fond of the Oriental style. He spared no expense in the construction, using more than 1 million bricks and importing materials and craftsmen from all over the country. He planned to make his mansion the most magnificent and luxurious home in the South. However, his dream was shattered by the Civil War, which started in 1861. Sloan and his workers, who were from the North, left to join the Union Army and fight for their ideals. Nutt, who was a Union sympathizer, was ostracized by his neighbors and friends, who supported the Confederacy. He also lost most of his wealth, as his cotton plantations were burned and looted by the Union troops. He became ill and depressed, and died in 1864, at the age of 48. He never saw his mansion completed, and neither did his wife Julia, who lived in the basement with their 8 children until her death in 1897. The mansion remained in the Nutt family until 1968, when it was sold to a local preservation society, who turned it into a museum. The mansion is also haunted by the ghosts of Nutt, Julia, and their children, who are still waiting for their home to be completed. Visitors and staff have reported various paranormal phenomena at the mansion, such as seeing apparitions, orbs, shadows, and figures in the upper floors, especially in the dome. Hearing voices, footsteps, laughter, music, and crying in the basement and the hallways. Feeling cold spots, breezes, touches, and tugs in the rooms and the stairs. Smelling perfume, flowers, smoke, and food in the air. Witnessing objects move, disappear, or reappear by themselves. Experiencing electrical malfunctions, such as lights flickering, cameras failing, and alarms going off. Having nightmares, visions, or sensations of being watched, followed, or attacked by an unseen force. Some of the most active areas in the mansion are the nursery, where the children's toys are often found rearranged, the dining room, where the table settings are sometimes changed, and the dome, where the tools and materials left by the workers are still visible. Some visitors have also claimed to see the ghost of Nutt himself, wearing a black suit and a top hat, standing on the balcony or walking in the garden. Longwood Mansion is a fascinating and tragic place, where the past and the present collide. It is a testament to the ambition and the sorrow of a man who wanted to build his dream home, but never got to see it finished. It is also a home to the spirits of his family, who are still attached to the mansion and its history. If you are looking for a haunting and historical experience, Longwood Mansion is the place to visit. Number 3, Cedar Grove Mansion, Vicksburg, Mississippi. We return to Vicksburg for our third haunted location, the Cedar Grove Mansion. This antebellum mansion was built in 1840 by John Alexander Klein, a wealthy businessman and plantation owner. The mansion was used as a Union headquarters during the Civil War, and was shelled by a cannonball, which is still lodged in the wall. The mansion is now a bed and breakfast, and guests can stay in one of the 33 rooms, each with its own ghost story. The history of Cedar Grove Mansion is a story of love, war, and survival. John Klein built the mansion as a gift for his wife Elizabeth, who was fond of the Greek Revival style and the Oriental decor. He spared no expense in the construction, using more than 1 million bricks and importing materials and craftsmen from all over the country. He also traveled to Europe with his wife for 2 years to furnish their home with the finest art and furniture. He planned to make his mansion the most elegant and luxurious home in the South. However, his dream was interrupted by the Civil War, which started in 1861. Klein, who was a Union sympathizer, was ostracized by his neighbors and friends, who supported the Confederacy. He also lost most of his wealth, as his cotton plantations were burned and looted by the Union troops. He became ill and depressed, and died in 1884, at the age of 72. He never saw his mansion restored to its former glory, and neither did his wife Elizabeth, who died in 1909, at the age of 83. They had 10 children, 4 of whom died young. The remaining 6 children inherited the mansion and kept it in the family until 1919. The mansion survived the war, despite being attacked by a cannonball, which pierced the wall of the parlor and landed on the dining room floor. The cannonball was fired by a Union gunboat on the Mississippi River, which was trying to hit the Confederate battery on the hill behind the mansion. The cannonball did not explode, but it left a hole in the wall, which is still visible today. The mansion also served as a Union headquarters during the Siege of Vicksburg, and was visited by General Ulysses S. Grant and Admiral David Farragut. The mansion also served as a hospital for the wounded soldiers, and some of them died in the house. The mansion is also haunted by the ghosts of Klein, Elizabeth, their children, and the soldiers who died there. Guests and staff have reported seeing apparitions, hearing voices, feeling cold spots, and even being touched by unseen hands. Some of the spirits that haunt the mansion are John Klein, who is said to haunt the master bedroom, where he died of yellow fever in 1884. He sometimes appears in the mirror or moves objects around. He is also known to play the piano in the parlor, where the cannonball hit the wall. Elizabeth Klein, who is said to haunt the nursery, where she spent most of her time with her children. She sometimes appears in the rocking chair or tucks the guests in bed. She is also known to smell of roses, her favorite perfume. John Jr., who is said to haunt the attic, where he died of typhoid in 1862, at the age of 18. He sometimes appears as a shadow or a figure, and likes to play pranks on the guests. He is also known to make noises, such as footsteps, laughter, and banging. Susan, who is said to haunt the south wing, where she lived with her husband, Dr. William Flowery. She sometimes appears as a lady in white, and likes to watch over the guests. She is also known to make sounds, such as singing, humming, and whispering. The soldiers, who are said to haunt the basement, where they were treated and buried. They sometimes appear as orbs, shadows, or figures, and like to interact with the guests. They are also known to make sounds, such as moaning, groaning, and crying. Cedar Grove Mansion is a beautiful and historic place, where the past and the present mingle. It is a testament to the love and the courage of a family who lived through the Civil War, and a home to the spirits who are still attached to the mansion and its history. If you are looking for a romantic and haunted experience, Cedar Grove Mansion is the place to visit. Number 2, King's Tavern, Natchez, Mississippi. Next, we head to Natchez, where we find the oldest standing building in the town, King's Tavern. The tavern was built in 1769 and was a popular stop for travelers, traders, and riverboatmen. However, the tavern also has a dark history of murder and mayhem. One of the most notorious ghosts that haunt the tavern is Madeline, a young woman who was allegedly the mistress of the tavern owner, Richard King. Madeline was killed by King's wife, who stabbed her in the chest with a dagger. Her body was hidden in the fireplace, along with 2 other men, who were also killed by King. Their remains were discovered in 1930, when the fireplace was renovated. Madeline's ghost is said to haunt the room where she was killed, and sometimes appears in the mirror or moves objects around. Other paranormal phenomena include the sound of a baby crying, the smell of burning wood, and the feeling of being watched. The history of King's Tavern is a story of intrigue, jealousy, and violence. The tavern was built by James Moore, a British loyalist who fled to Natchez after the American Revolution. He sold the tavern to Richard King, a wealthy merchant and landowner, who moved in with his wife and children. King also brought along his mistress, Madeline, a beautiful and young French woman, who he met in New Orleans. King kept Madeline in a separate room in the tavern, where he would visit her secretly. However, his wife soon found out about the affair, and plotted to kill Madeline and her lover. One night, when King was away on business, his wife sneaked into Madeline's room, where she found her sleeping in bed. She grabbed a dagger and stabbed Madeline in the heart, killing her instantly. She then dragged her body to the fireplace, where she hid it behind a brick wall. She also killed 2 other men, who were rumored to be Madeline's lovers, and hid their bodies in the same place. She then cleaned up the blood and returned to her room, hoping that no one would ever find out what she had done. However, she did not escape justice, as her crimes were eventually exposed. In 1930, the tavern was undergoing some renovations, and the workers decided to remove the old fireplace. They were shocked to find 3 skeletons behind the wall, along with a rusty dagger. They also found a gold locket around Madeline's neck, with the initials RK engraved on it. The workers realized that they had stumbled upon a gruesome murder scene, and alerted the authorities. The skeletons were identified as Madeline and the 2 men, and the dagger was matched to the one that belonged to King's wife. The story of the tavern murders made headlines, and attracted the attention of the public and the paranormal. The tavern is also haunted by the ghosts of Madeline, King, his wife, and the 2 men, who are still restless and angry. Guests and staff have reported seeing apparitions, hearing voices, feeling cold spots, and even being attacked by unseen forces. Some of the spirits that haunt the tavern are Madeline, who is said to haunt the room where she was killed, and sometimes appears in the mirror or moves objects around. She sometimes tries to communicate with the guests, or warns them of danger. She is also known to smell of lavender, her favorite scent. King, who is said to haunt the bar area, where he used to drink and gamble. He sometimes appears as a shadow or a figure, and likes to interact with the guests. He is also known to make sounds, such as clinking glasses, shuffling cards, and laughing. King's wife, who is said to haunt the staircase, where she used to spy on her husband and Madeline. She sometimes appears as a lady in black, and likes to scare the guests. She is also known to make sounds, such as footsteps, whispering, and screaming. The two men, who are said to haunt the fireplace, where they were buried. They sometimes appear as orbs, shadows, or figures, and like to disturb the guests. They are also known to make sounds, such as moaning, groaning, and crying. King's Tavern is a historic and haunted place, where the past and the present collide. It is a testament to the passion and the tragedy of a love triangle that ended in bloodshed, and a home to the spirits who are still trapped in the tavern and its history. If you are looking for a thrilling and haunted experience, King's Tavern is the place to visit. Number 1. The Witch of Yazoo's Grave at Glenwood Cemetery, Yazoo City, Mississippi. And finally, we arrive at our number 1 haunted location in Mississippi, the Witch of Yazoo's Grave at Glenwood Cemetery in Yazoo City. This grave is surrounded by chain links and has a mysterious legend that dates back to the 19th century. The legend was popularized by Willie Morris, a famous author and journalist who grew up in Yazoo City and wrote about his childhood experiences in his book, Good Old Boy. However, the legend and the grave existed long before Morris was born, and have fascinated generations of locals and visitors alike. According to the legend, in 1884, there was a strange woman who lived in the swamps near the Yazoo River. She was rumored to be a witch, who had the power to lure men to their doom with her seductive charms. She would entice them into the swamp, where she would torture and kill them, and then dump their bodies into the river. No one knew her name, where she came from, or why she did what she did. She was feared and hated by the people of Yazoo City, who avoided the swamp at all costs. One day, the sheriff of Yazoo City decided to put an end to the witch's reign of terror. He gathered a posse of men and followed her tracks into the swamp. He chased her through the marshes, where she tried to escape by jumping from tree to tree. However, she made a fatal mistake and landed on a patch of quicksand. The sheriff caught up with her, but it was too late. She was sinking into the mire, and there was nothing he could do to save her. As she was drowning, she uttered a curse on the town and its people. She said, "In 20 years, I will return and burn this town to the ground." The sheriff thought she was crazy, and left her to die. He marked the spot where she sank with a stake, and returned to the town. No one believed the witch's curse, and life went on as usual in Yazoo City. However, 20 years later, on May 25, 1904, a terrible fire broke out and engulfed the town in flames. The fire started in the parlor of a young woman who was preparing for her wedding, and spread quickly due to the strong winds that were blowing that day. The fire was so fierce and unpredictable that it seemed to have a mind of its own. It jumped from building to building, sparing some and destroying others. It consumed over 300 buildings, including homes, businesses, churches, and schools. It was the worst fire in the history of Yazoo City, and left thousands of people homeless and destitute. The next day, a group of curious citizens went to the swamp to check on the witch's grave. They were shocked to find that the chain around the grave had been broken in two, as if by some supernatural force. They wondered if the witch had somehow escaped and caused the fire, or if it was just a coincidence. They decided to repair the chain and reinforce it with more links, hoping to keep the witch's spirit contained. They also erected a tombstone with the letters T.W., which stood for the witch. Ever since then, the witch's grave has been a source of fascination and fear for the people of Yazoo City. Many have claimed to see, hear, and feel the presence of the witch, especially on the anniversary of the fire. Some of the paranormal phenomena reported at the grave include the chain moving, rattling, or breaking by itself, the sound of laughter, crying, or screaming coming from the grave, the smell of smoke, sulfur, or rotting flesh, the feeling of being watched, followed, or touched by an invisible entity, the appearance of orbs, shadows, or figures near the grave, the occurrence of accidents, illnesses, or misfortunes after visiting the grave. Some people believe that the witch is still trying to escape and fulfill her curse, while others think that she is just a legend and a hoax. Some people respect and fear the witch, while others mock and challenge her. Some people avoid the grave, while others seek it out for thrill or curiosity. Whatever the case may be, the witch's grave remains one of the most haunted and intriguing places in Mississippi, and a must-see for anyone who loves a good ghost story. So, there you have it, the top 5 haunted locations in Mississippi. Do you agree with our list? Have you visited any of these places? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay spooky.